Most people think they know Millie Jackson, the R&B firebrand, the woman whose bold humor, raw honesty, and infamous album covers rewrote the rules of soul music. But behind the unapologetic attitude and the decades of headline-grabbing performances lies another story, one very few have ever seen. Because inside her private Atlanta mansion, far from the spotlight, Millie Jackson lives a life that surprises even her biggest fans, a life shaped by resilience, sharp wit, business instincts, and a fortune built on her own terms. How did a Georgia native, once dismissed for being too outspoken, turn that very voice into a $6 million legacy? And what secrets about her career, her home, and her personal world reveal the real Millie Jackson, the woman behind the legend? Let's step inside. Millie Jackson, born Mildred Jackson, grew up in Thompson, Georgia, in the tiny Briar Creek community, about 36 miles west of Augusta. Her early childhood was marked by tragedy. Before she turned 2, her mother died in a horrific stove accident after accidentally using gasoline instead of kerosene. Her father, Ty Rufus, a sharecropper, remarried quickly, more than once. "It was just me, my daddy, and all those women he married," Jackson said. "Since I was a girl, he kept trying to find me a mama." During the week, Ty worked behind a mule in the fields. But on weekends, their home transformed into the neighborhood liquor house. He made corn liquor, and young Millie happily served drinks while acting as the house DJ. "I was in charge of the music and the corn liquor," she said. "Our house was the house. Folks came, drank, listened to music, then carried their expletive home to get ready for church on Sunday." When Millie was 14, her father drove his sister to New Jersey as she relocated, and then stayed there for 2 years. "I guess he thought he was still driving," she joked. She was sent to live with her mother's parents in the home of her grandfather, Reverend William Bradshaw, a dramatic shift. "I went from the liquor-serving house to Reverend Bradshaw's house, which I didn't think matched me too well," she said, drawing out Reverend with theatrical disgust. "You don't go from serving liquor to praying every day." A year later, she ran away to live with one of her former stepmothers, then eventually left Georgia altogether to reunite with her father in Newark. In the Northeast, Jackson worked as a waitress at Schrafft's, attended night school, and tried her hand at modeling, even landing the cover of Jive magazine. But her life changed on a cold December night in 1964 at Harlem's Palm Cafe. Jackson complained loudly to her friends that the club's singer was terrible. They dared her, bet her $5, to do better. 20-year-old Millie marched onto the stage and belted out Ben E. King's "Don't Play That Song." "Yes, I too sang with Lester Young," she later joked, referring to the legendary band leader performing that night. Someone in the audience noticed her talent and booked her for a gig at the Crystal Ballroom the following week. Jackson spent her entire paycheck, plus the $5 she'd won, on a new outfit. Until that night, she had never once imagined becoming a singer. More gigs followed. A club in Hoboken hired her for a month, paying $15 a night, more than her day job. At the time, she had only 3 songs. She opened with Maxine Brown's "All in My Mind," followed with "Don't Play That Song," and closed with a fiery version of B.B. King's "Rock Me Baby." "I played the club for another month, and that was the beginning of it," Jackson said. "I ain't stopped yet." Songwriter Billy Nichols remembers the first time he met her. She walked into Sue Records with a demo, full of confidence and louder than anyone else in the room. "She said whatever she wanted to say," Nichols recalled. "There was an honesty in that. It attracted me." Still, he wasn't convinced she would ever become a star. "She sounded like a good singer," he said. "But there were a lot of good singers." Millie Jackson, however, was nothing if not determined, and she proved him wrong. Jackson and Billy Nichols, who was hustling through New York at the time trying to make a name for himself as a songwriter, kept in touch after their first meeting. Eventually, Jackson invited him to see her perform at a club in New Haven, Connecticut. When Nichols walked through the door that night, something immediately struck him. The room was silent, not restless or bored, but mesmerized. The bartenders had stopped pouring, the cigarette girls had paused mid-stride, and every set of eyes was locked on the stage. There stood Millie Jackson, not singing, but talking, commanding the room with nothing but her voice, her attitude, and a storyline only she could deliver. That's when I realized she was a star, Nichols recalled. I had never seen that part of her act before. I said to myself, all this girl needs is a record. She already had the stage act. She just needed a hit. After she finally landed her first record deal, Jackson initially modeled her vocal approach after fellow Georgia native Gladys Knight. Everybody said we sounded alike, Jackson admitted. Interestingly, her earliest shows weren't built around singing. They were built around talking. Unsure of how to present herself on stage, she filled the silence with sharp, spontaneous banter that soon became the most memorable part of her act. I just talked to the audience because I was nervous, she later explained. Then my label, Spring Records, wanted to record it the same way I did it live. It was longer than a 3-minute single, but not quite a whole album side, so I said, we need to keep this story going. That nervous improvisation eventually became Millie Jackson's signature style. Bold, funny, and completely her own. Millie Jackson's recording career began almost by accident, or more accurately, on a dare. In 1964, friends pushed her to enter a talent contest at Small's Paradise, a well-known Harlem nightclub. She walked on stage, gave it everything she had, and won. That victory set her on a path she had never planned, but was absolutely born for. Her first official recordings came in 1970 with MGM Records, but the partnership was brief. She soon moved to New York-based Spring Records, where she began a long, defining chapter of her career. Working closely with the label's in-house producer, Rayford Gerald, Jackson scored her first charting single in 1971 with A Child of God, It's Hard to Believe, reaching number 1. 22 on the R&B charts. A year later, she broke through in a much bigger way. Her single, Ask Me What You Want, became her first top 10 R&B hit and crossed over into the pop top 30. She followed it with another success, My Man, a Sweet Man, which climbed to number 7 on the R&B chart and even reached number 50 in the UK. All 3 hits were co-written by Jackson herself. In the UK, My Man, a Sweet Man became a Northern Soul favorite, as did her 1976 single, A House for Sale. By 1973, she delivered her third U.S. R&B top 10 hit, It Hurts So Good, reaching number 3 on the R&B chart and number 24 on the Billboard Hot 100. The song appeared on an album of the same name and was also featured in the blaxploitation film Cleopatra Jones. In 1974, Jackson released Caught Up, the album that fully introduced her signature raunchy spoken-word style. One of its standout tracks was her bold reinterpretation of Luther Ingram's million-selling If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right, earning her a Grammy nomination. Around this time, she began working exclusively with producer Brad Shapiro and recorded much of her material at Muscle Shoals Studio in Alabama, alongside the legendary Muscle Shoals Rhythm section. She continued the concept of Caught Up with a follow-up album, Still Caught Up. Over the next decade, Jackson released a string of successful albums and numerous R&B chart entries. One of her biggest hits from that era was her 1977 rendition of Merle Haggard's country song, If We're Not Back in Love by Monday. More hits followed, including her disco version of Boney M's Never Change Lovers in the Middle of the Night, which reached number 1. 33 on the R&B chart in 1979. That same year, she recorded Royal Rappins with Isaac Hayes and released 2 live projects, the double album Live and Uncensored from the Roxy in Los Angeles, and Live and Outrageous recorded at Mr. V's Figure 8 in Atlanta. She also created and produced the group Facts of Life, who landed a major hit in 1976 with Sometimes, reaching number 3 R&B and number 31 pop. When Spring Records closed in 1984, Jackson briefly found herself without a label. But in 1986, she signed with Jive Records, releasing 4 albums and returning to the R&B top 10 with Hot, Wild, Unrestricted, Crazy Love, and Love is a Dangerous Game. She also collaborated with Elton John on the 1985 single Act of War, which became a top 40 hit in the UK. In 1991, Jackson expanded her creative reach by writing, producing, and starring in the touring stage play Young Man, Older Woman, inspired by her Jive album of the same name. She later appeared in a 1994 Thanksgiving episode of Martin titled Feast or Famine, playing a character named Florine. In 2000, her vocals from If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right were sampled in Etienne de Crécy's track Am I Wrong, introducing her voice to a new generation of listeners. Millie Jackson has never shied away from controversy, and even her album covers became part of her bold reputation. Over the years, she has frequently landed on worst album cover lists, sometimes by design. One cover, ESP, Extra Sexual Persuasion, shows her gazing into a crystal ball that strategically highlights her cleavage. Another, the notorious Back to the Sut, features her sitting on a toilet in a pose that leaves little to the imagination. Jackson always embraced the shock value, insisting that she would rather be unforgettable than safe. Today, Jackson runs her own record label, Weird Records. After taking a long break from recording, she returned in 2001 with Not for Church Folk, an album that revived her signature attitude with a modern urban contemporary sound. It included the singles But a Size and Leave Me Alone, as well as a collaboration with rapper Da Brat on the track In My Life. For 13 years, Jackson also hosted her own radio show on KKDA 7:30 a.m. in Dallas, Texas. Broadcasting remotely from her home in Atlanta, she held down the afternoon drive time slot from 3 to 6 p.m. until January 6, 2012. In 2006, 5 of her best-selling albums, Millie Jackson, 1972, It Hurts So Good, 1973, Caught Up, 1974, Still Caught Up, 1975, and Feelin' Bitchy, 1977, were digitally remastered and reissued with bonus tracks. Most of her Spring Records era catalog is now available through Ace Records in the UK. Her Jive Records album, An Imitation of Love, received a remastered, expanded reissue in 2013 via Funky Town Grooves, though many of her other Jive and Ichiban releases remain out of print, except for tracks included on compilation albums. On February 6, 2012, her career was celebrated in the documentary Unsung, the story of Mildred Millie Jackson, which aired on the TV One network. That same year, she performed at Washington, D.C.'s historic Howard Theater on August 3rd and at B.B. King's Blues Club in New York on August 4th. Her contributions to R&B were officially honored on June 6, 2015, when she was inducted into the official Rhythm and Blues Music Hall of Fame in Clarksdale, Mississippi. R&B legend Millie Jackson has never softened her edges, and even now she remains unapologetically outspoken. When a reporter once sat down with her and opened with a simple question, "What is a typical day in the life of Millie Jackson?" she didn't respond. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by mail, lifted a cup of hazelnut-scented coffee, and simply stared. She sipped slowly, savoring the taste, batting her eyes and licking her lips while the reporter nervously scribbled nonsense into a notebook. When he repeated the question, she took another deliberate sip before finally bursting into laughter. "I just finished," she said. "This is my day." Her daughter, sitting nearby, laughed with her. In that moment, he understood. The teasing, the timing, the playful mischief. This was classic Millie Jackson. Growing up, the reporter had never fully grasped her magnitude. He'd seen the provocative album covers, overheard her late-night records spinning at grown-up gatherings, and caught snippets of her famously explicit live performances. But Millie Jackson was always grown folks' music, the kind played after the kids were asleep and the card table came out. In the vast universe of 1970s soul and R&B divas, there was truly no one like her. She wasn't the most commercially successful singer, nor did she have the most polished voice, and radio programmers avoided her because of her raw, explicit lyrics. But on stage, she was unstoppable. Jackson stalked the stage with the energy of a panther, or as fans joked, a cougar, growling, grinding, and delivering blisteringly honest monologues about sex, relationships, and everything in between. She cursed freely, sweated through her set, and turned every performance into a spectacle. She earned 2 Grammy nominations for her powerhouse rendition of If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right, a song she could stretch into a 20-minute emotional odyssey during her shows. She also created what she proudly called a symphony composed entirely of curse words, and somehow made it brilliant. Provocative, raunchy, yet always commanding respect, Jackson walked a tightrope few artists could manage. Long before hip-hop existed, she wove spoken-word storytelling between her verses, a style many consider an early blueprint for rap. Millie Jackson is a textbook example of what writer Michael Harriot calls black famous, instantly recognizable to black audiences, yet often unknown to white ones. Think Maze featuring Frankie Beverly. Jackson, raised in rural Georgia, forged a career through sheer will, talent, and a no-nonsense authenticity that made her unforgettable. Across 6 decades, she toured the world, earned 3 gold albums, scored Grammy nominations, sold out arenas, and cemented her place in the Rhythm and Blues Music Hall of Fame. Yet, despite her achievements, she'd never been profiled in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, a fact that amused her. "Church folks gonna lose their minds," she joked when told she'd appear in the Sunday paper. At 81, Millie Jackson is still sharp, fearless, wickedly funny, and confident enough in her own skin to flaunt it, tastefully, of course, and always on her terms. Throughout their conversation, Jackson often broke into song to make a point. Talking about her finances, she suddenly sang, "You can buy you some dirt. There will never be no mo. Just buy dirt." She explained that the lyric stuck with her the first time she heard it. "So every time I got a new contract, I bought dirt. Now I have dirt. And I don't have to sing." Jackson continued performing well into her 70s, slowing down only when the pandemic hit. She managed 2 shows in 2023, the most she'd done since 2019. "With COVID, I wasn't going out there in that crap," she said. "And frankly, Scarlett, I never did drugs. I only drank red wine and saved my money. So I didn't need to go to work. It's all right." Because Millie Jackson became known for her explicit language and fearless stage monologues, radio airplay grew scarce. By the late 1970s, her record sales had begun to dip, but her live career never faltered. She remained one of the most in-demand performers in R&B, traveling the world during the week and flying home on weekends to be with her children, Keisha and Gerald, in Teaneck, New Jersey. In 1985, the family relocated to Atlanta. And because no man, and certainly no manager, could ever control her, Jackson took full charge of her own career. "I never saw the sense in paying somebody 20 to 25% of my income just to say, 'She'll do the gig,'" she said. "I don't think so. Those fractions didn't work." She hired her own band, launched her own label, Weird Records, and booked every tour herself. When she released her album, Young Man, Older Woman, she even turned it into a full-stage play that became a hit on the touring circuit. Years earlier, in 1979, she put out I Had to Say It, a track many now consider the first rap song recorded by a woman on a major label. She even experimented with a country album just because she could. Her daughter Keisha, now 60, admires that independence. "What I think is great is that she's put herself in a position as an incredible business person to pick and choose what she wants to do," Keisha said. "If she doesn't feel like working because all the offers are trash, then she won't work. and she's perfectly fine with that. These days, Keisha, who looks strikingly like her mother, serves as Jackson's unofficial spokesperson. She schedules interviews, sits in on conversations, and helps provide context when needed. Keisha began singing background for her mother at 15 and later released 2 solo albums. But she built her true legacy as one of the industry's most respected background and session vocalists, performing with Joss Stone, Angie Stone, Faith Evans, Outkast, and most famously, Erykah Badu. "She always wanted me to be an attorney because I debate real well," Keisha said. "But I was around music so much that singing was natural for me. The things your parent almost forbids you to do are the things you run toward." She is currently touring with Kenny Loggins on the Yacht Rock Review Tour, proof that talent runs deep in the Jackson family. Millie Jackson's 6-decade career, built on raw honesty, fearless stagecraft, and a business sense sharper than any manager she ever fired, has resulted in an estimated net worth of about $6 million. Unlike many artists of her era who lost fortunes to bad contracts or fast living, Jackson built her wealth slowly and deliberately. As she jokes, "Every time I got a contract, I bought dirt." That philosophy has paid off, and nowhere is it more evident than in the home she has built, and fiercely protected, in Southwest Atlanta. Her Atlanta residence is not the ostentatious mansion one might expect from a performer known for scandalous album covers and provocative live shows. Instead, Jackson's home reflects who she has always been: bold, comfortable, unpretentious, and completely in control. The house sits on a quiet, tree-lined corner of a well-established neighborhood, the kind of place where longtime residents know each other by name and keep an eye out for one another. Jackson values that privacy. She chose the property because it gave her space, stability, and the freedom to live on her own terms. Inside, the home is warm and lived in, filled with decades of memorabilia from a career that spans R&B, soul, comedy, and even country. Her kitchen, where she often sits with visitors, sipping hazelnut coffee and teasing them mercilessly, is the heart of the house. The table is usually scattered with mail, notes, and reminders, a sign that Jackson still manages her own business even in her 80s. The decor mixes Southern comfort with flashes of her signature irreverence. Framed photos from her wildest concerts sit beside family portraits. Gold records share wall space with joke plaques, and cozy couches make the living room feel like home rather than a display. In recent years, Jackson has settled comfortably into a slower, more selective lifestyle. She still performs occasionally, 2 shows in 2023, but only when the offers meet her standards. She spends most of her days at home, surrounded by her daughter Keisha, grandchildren, and the close circle of friends who've been through every era of her career. Her mornings start quietly, with coffee at the kitchen table, and her evenings often end with her watching old movies or listening to new music, curious as ever. For Millie Jackson, wealth has never been about flash. It's about freedom. The freedom to work when she chooses, stay home when she wants, and live exactly the way she pleases in the Atlanta house she turned into her sanctuary. Millie Jackson's life today is a testament to ownership, of her career, her voice, and the home she built brick by brick on her own terms. From the liquor house in rural Georgia to a comfortable, laughter-filled haven in Atlanta, her journey is as bold and unapologetic as the woman herself. But now we want to hear from you. Which part of Millie Jackson's story surprised you most? Her net worth, her Atlanta sanctuary, or the way she engineered her own destiny? Tell us in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories that take you behind the lives of legendary artists.